Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at the other of the newest Massive Biters figures from Mattel. This is the other new one. You also have the Albertosaurus, which we reviewed a few days back. Now we have the alternate paint variant of the Sarcosuchus, which the original figure I was a huge fan of. This one I wasn't really looking forward to too much because I didn't really like the paint scheme that I had seen on it. However, just like pretty much always, having it here in hand, it is actually much more appealing than I expected it to be. There's only one real area that I'm not a big fan of on the paint scheme of this figure, but overall I actually think it looks really quite nice. But as far as the box goes, you've got Owen in blue staring at us as always, Sarcosuchus right there in the middle, and then an image over here of the action feature and of course how you actually activate it. And then on the back, more images again of the action feature, and then an image of the Albertosaurus, which is the, again, other figure that is in the Massive Biters line currently. So, without further ado, let's break this out of the packaging and take a look at it. So here is our newest version of the Massive Biters Sarcosuchus figure, and it does, again, it looks really nice out of the packaging. I'm actually quite impressed with it. The only area that I was just speaking of a minute ago that I don't really like about it is this weird coloration here, this bright, like, orangish color here on the side. Not a big fan of that, but if we had gotten rid of that, I feel like the overall appearance of the figure is actually quite nice and definitely something that could have potentially been the coloration of the animal, because a lot of the tones are much darker than I was initially led to believe, sort of like the Albertosaurus, how I kind of felt like the promotional images made me believe that it was going to be a lot brighter, but in person it was a good bit darker, just like that here with the Sarcosuchus, where the coloration actually does look a lot darker and a lot more natural. But I'm pretty excited about this figure now, having it in hand, taking a quick glance at it, so let's go ahead and get a closer look right now. So we have actually looked at the sculpt of the Sarcosuchus previously with the initial review, so if you would like to see a more detailed review of the Sarcosuchus sculpt, make sure you check out my original review on this figure. But we really only need to look at what's new on the figure for this time, and that would be the new paint scheme. You can see primarily up here on the head of the Sarcosuchus, it's like a very nice dark purple coloration, but then you also have like an area of maroon that sort of runs down the snout of the Sarcosuchus, and I think that is really nice to see, just that little extra color variation up here on the head. I do enjoy when Mattel kind of adds a little more paint than they would normally do with their figures, and that was definitely a nice touch. One thing that I'm actually a huge fan of on the figure are the eyes. I think the eyes are great. A really nice, beautiful looking greenish coloration for the eyes. Very nice pupil painted in there, and they're both in picture perfect fashion applied, it looks like. So that is a really, really cool aspect of the figure, but I love the way that those eyes kind of jump out at you due to that darker purple coloration that is like the primary coloration of the upper side of the head, and then it kind of has that really nice bright green there, and it just plays off of each other so well. Like, you really cannot help but take note to how beautiful those eyes are. Fantastic choice on the part of Mattel. But then on the lower jaw, you have a nice grayish coloration, which as well, I think looks pretty darn nice on the figure. Look at how really nicely sculpted that kind of area right here inside the mouth is. Very nicely detailed. Inside the mouth, you have a beautiful, very realistic coloration. In here, definitely nicely applied as well. You don't see any sloppiness at all as far as that goes. Sometimes you'll see some of like the paint running in on the tongue and stuff, or this area kind of missing. They don't even paint that sometimes, but here on this Sarcosuchus, it all looks great, and you have a very nice gloss coat in there as well, which helps it to shine quite realistically. The teeth also look to be painted really nicely. Beautiful as far as the teeth go, because you have individual sculpts for each tooth, so it's not very hard to kind of mess those up and make them sloppy, but I think Mattel has actually done an excellent job here on the teeth of the Sarcosuchus as well. So an extremely impressive area to the Sarcosuchus is definitely the head. But as we move back here into the body, you can see that that very dark purple coloration continues to run actually the entire length of the figure. So I love seeing paint here on the tail like that. That, again, just makes the figure look so much better. Look at how nice that looks now, having paint out there onto the tail. Well, I should say alternate paint, not just one solid color. But you can also see that there's like a reddish coloration. It's more like a dark red, similar to the coloration up here, but that looks a little more maroon than this. I think this is just like a dark red, but you can see it kind of leaks down in certain spots. And then right here in the center, we have that kind of awkward, ugly orange coloration. And again, I think it would have looked beautiful. It really does look quite nice, but Without this, it would have been picture perfect, I feel like. But again, it's not something that takes away from the figure too much. It's just an odd color to have in there, and it's a little bit too bright for my liking. You can also see that there are speckles all over the figure, similar to what we usually get from Mattel. You can see them kind of here on the leg. So you do have that little bit of extra color variation going on. There's no alternate color on the underside or anything like that at all. That's just non-existent down there. There is the Jurassic Facts app, however, if you would like to add this to your collection. But again, you can actually see the speckling down here pretty darn nicely. It's like a maroon speckling on this one. You can really see it here in the tail. But you don't have any painted nails on the figure either, which in my opinion is definitely a little bit of a downside, especially since the Albertosaurus did have painted nails. I would have liked to have seen that here on the Sarcosuchus as well. But other than that, there's really nothing going on paint-wise, so let's go ahead and check out the action feature. It is exactly the same action feature as we had last time with the Sarcosuchus, so don't expect anything brand new and crazy, but you have a button here on the tail that you'll push down, and the jaw snaps. He doesn't actually snap all the way shut. You can see right there, it's just still open a little bit right there, but it can close like that if you push it. Just that action feature isn't strong enough to actually close the entire mouth. But you can move that head all over the place, and you can have him attack and kill whatever it is exactly that you would like him to do, and he can even shake it and all that fun stuff. So, pretty cool action feature. I definitely do like it. It's pretty much exactly what you would expect for a Sarcosuchus. You, as far as articulation goes, of course, have articulation in the legs, and you can see both legs in the front and back, and of course on the opposing side all articulate. The legs can also come out away from the body here on the front. Not so much on the back, maybe a little bit. Yeah, you got a little bit of distance that you can go with it, but for the most part, they stay pretty much in place. And then aside from that, there's not really much else going on articulation-wise besides what you saw with the action feature, which is the articulated jaw, and then, of course, articulation in the neck and tail. But I think it's pretty cool regardless, and an overall really cool looking Sarcosuchus with some pretty darn nice articulation and action feature. As far as a size goes, from the head here, the snout to the tail, you are looking at roughly the 14-inch range, or about 36 centimeters, somewhere in that range. For a height, the highest point would be the snout while it's sitting here having it hang open, and you're looking at about the 4-inch range, or 10 centimeters. That is one thing that I feel like could have been maybe improved upon, would be the fact that the mouth would stay shut when it's kind of chilling here and not sitting here with its mouth open. But, I mean, it is what it is. I don't really know any way that you could have gotten away with that and still managed to have that cool chomping feature if the mouth would have been closed. So, I mean, you could have done it, but you wouldn't be able to actually hold the figure that you grab in the mouth without holding it down with the button like that. So there's no real way to get around that, I'd say. But as far as the size comparison goes, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our really cool Mattel Sarcosuchus. And you can see next to these figures that, again, it sports a very large size. Definitely a very big figure, and I really quite like the larger size on it because it makes the figure as a whole look extremely impressive. And being a Sarcosuchus, it was a very large animal to begin with, so the larger size is 100% awesome. So this Mattel Jurassic World Massive Biters Sarcosuchus figure version 2 is another really cool figure. I didn't quite expect to like it as much as I do. Of course, I do like the original more just because I really felt like everything on that one did look nice and natural. The coloration was a very beautiful choice on the part of Mattel for the initial version, but this one as well is actually quite nice, and even though it has a little bit of a flashier look, for the most part, it is quite realistic looking overall, aside from that one spot in the stomach region where we have that kind of awkward looking orangish coloration. That area could have been dismissed, but aside from that, I feel like everything looks pretty good color-wise. Nice dark tones of color, except for the gray, of course, is a lighter tone, but it looks good. It's something that I could have potentially had seen on this animal if it were in fact alive. Of course, the sculpt is fantastic. Mattel really delivered on their Sarcosuchus sculpt, I think, and there's just so much incredible detail on it. And I actually recently purchased another Sarcosuchus, although it's the original Sarcosuchus, not this version. But I purchased one to repaint just because that detail is so good, so I'll have to get around to doing that at some point. But I really feel like that detail just is aching for a nice dark wash to crawl down between those cracks and crevices of the scales to really bring that detail out. It would look very impressive overall. But again, sculpt-wise, it is fantastic. Paint-wise, it's pretty darn good for the most part. And then you have some really cool articulation with the figure. Nothing over the top amazing, but it's definitely pretty much your standard Mattel articulation, and it's quite nicely done. And then you have an action feature, which again is the perfect action feature for a Sarcosuchus. The only thing that I would have liked to have seen is some way to kind of have the mouth shut, and then you push the button, it would open the mouth. But like I had stated earlier, that would be pretty hard to actually hold your prey in its mouth if you did it that way. So that's probably best that they chose to go this route with the figure overall as far as the action feature goes. And it does operate pretty nicely for the most part, aside from that little area of the mouth that doesn't close all the way just because the action feature doesn't seem to have enough force. But again, it'll probably serve its purpose quite well. So this is a really cool Sarcosuchus yet again from Mattel. So if you are interested in picking this up, make sure you head to your local Target or Walmart, because it is actually showing up now in both stores, and pick yourself up this really cool Massive Biters Jurassic World Sarcosuchus from Mattel. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.